All right, I think this is going to be the third, there might be a fourth rendition of the B-Series Trials and Tribulations. So the GSR block, I think we're just about ready to really put her together for the final time. We started to get her together, got the fucking crank all bolted down, did the N2. I can't remember if I explained that or not, but one of the bearings got grooves in it after we spun it around. Took it to the machine shop and there was a slight defect on the crank. Had the crank polished. It's over here. Everything's already plastic gauged. I don't think I'm going to do it again. It should be fine. So we're just going to slap her together. We got B20 for the CRV. Got a new block. You know, we did all that shit and it was still leaking. So just torqued the head down and is probably going to be going back in the car here very shortly. And so while I'm gonna be bouncing back and forth while Cameron's trying to get that in the car. Me and Pat over here are gonna be trying GSR together. So right now, what we're doing is one of his oil squirters broke. The tip off, we actually found the tip of it in the oil pickup. So he ordered a new one. And right now we're just installing the final oil squirter into the block here. Just, this one wasn't wanting to fully bolt down. It was kind of kiltered off center. Here, let me see. So, yeah, you might want to tap that or something. Mm-hmm. It's not wanting to fully go in there flush. Almost like that hole. You can see the hole is kind of mushroomed a little bit. So I'm gonna get these in and then just gonna try to pick up the camera and do snippets of things we do. Be right back. Alright, so forgot to pick up the camera a little while. We got everything in the bottom end is pretty much done. The rod bolts we torqued to 33 pounds, and then the girdle is torqued to 49 in the center and 56 on the end two. We put new rear main seal, Honda Bond, new oil pump seal and O-ring, and then Honda bonded all of that. Put the crank sensor back in, so that goes like this. It has a little wire for that. That's for OBD2 GSR. Cameron's got that pretty much together. Torqued the head on that and whatnot, and yeah, we're making good leeway. It spins over really good. And GSR's coming together. I think the next step will be put the head on. All right. Here is the top half of this B18 C1. Pretty little cylinder walls there. Got the gasket on, and I think it's about time to set this head on there. Yes, sir. Here. Transmission side. Bare ass head. So you know that the VTEC and the water neck goes here. So that goes towards the transmission. So that's on there. And where we got the head bolts at? Gonna find the head bolts.
ARP head studs.
Oh, we got ARPs. Oh, I forgot. Okay. ARP head studs. Gonna give it a little bit more of a clamping load, but there's a little bit of a process you gotta do with these. You want to lube the threads, then you got to put ARP grease on the washer cap. Usually these things come with an instruction manual. what it came with. Okay, to ensure proper thread engagement and accurate torque readings, clean all threads in the block, chase if necessary with ARP thread chaser. We're gonna send it. Clean and inspect all hardware. Yep, if the cylinder head studs protrude into the water jacket, lubricate the block threads of the studs with ARP thread sealer. So, screw studs into the block hand tight. Install the cylinder head and check for binding. Lubricate all the stud threads, nuts, and washers with ARP Ultra Torque Fastener Assembly Lube. Follow the manufacturer's recommended torque sequence. Tighten the nuts in 3 equal steps up to 80 foot-pounds. So 3 equal steps up to 80 foot-pounds. We'll probably do like 25, 55, 80, something in that realm. So if you look over here, we got the nuts and washers, the ARP assembly lubricant, and then the ARP studs. And they all look to be the same length. I know that on the LS's, I think a couple of them are different length, right Cameron? The B20? Yeah. And so if you look here, if I'm correct, the little dimple, that side goes into the block because it's self-stopping there, I think. Yeah, so that goes into the block. And also you can tell because on the top side here, they got this little Allen keyhole so that you can hand tighten them, but it gives you something to stick on there and tighten them all into the block with. I think we're not going to lubricate those threads. I think the threads are pretty clean, so we'll just hand tighten them down into the block there. And then one thing, if you come look in here, that can be a bitch about these is once they're all in there, you got to get a washer on there flat, and then you got to get the nut on there. And a lot of times I've noticed, keep a magnet handy because the washer will like to go off to the side, sideways in there, and it's a bitch. So you really just got to play with it. So I'm going to put almost all of them in the block and then keep one out so I can come over here to my fucking Allen's, find a good size Allen that fits in there. Perfect. And then again, if you tighten them down into the block and you feel any binding or it's wanting to fight you, just pull it out and throw a little bit of engine oil on there, help guide it in. But I have a feeling that these should go in just fine. Patrick didn't have any thread issues or anything when he was pulling the old ones out. ARP head studs can actually be a really good improvement. Help keep that head down and sealed and prevent blown head gaskets. It's almost a must if you're doing forced induction. ARP rod bolts also. So your local machine shop should be able to install ARP rod bolts on your stock rods and give it more of a clamping load. We didn't do that on this build, but I've done it on the GSR build in the past. ARP main studs though, so that's where things can get hairy. The mains on the block, sometimes since the block is aluminum and the caps are cast iron, the main studs are such a higher clamping force than the stock clamping force, they can actually make that circle out of round, and so it can mushroom out the bearings. So when you do the main studs, you're really supposed to take the block to a machine shop with it torqued to spec, and then they need to line hone and make sure that the bore didn't change from the higher torque. And the machine shop we haven't found didn't do that, so we actually, not on this block, but my buddy's block for a turbo build he just did, he had to swap all back to stock bolts because his crank wouldn't spin over once he torqued it down with ARPs. And then he ended up having to buy all new bearings because since they were out of round with the crank and whatnot, it caused the bearings to deform. So just be careful when it comes to ARP main studs. But another thing with building engines is sometimes it can seem overwhelming, especially rotating assembly stuff. But you take your time, and you feel like something's not right, you know, you can always double check it while you have it apart, instead of just, you know, sending shit. Sometimes it can be fine, sometimes it can be a problem. So got almost all of these hand threaded down into the block here. You can also get a better, more accurate torque reading with studs versus bolts, because the threads on the block are aluminum, and threading that steel bolt down into them at a high torque, you know, they bind. Aluminum is a very malleable metal, and so when you have studs that are hand tightened into the block, instead of trying to pull into the block further, it's already fully threaded into the block and it pulls up on it, but you're literally just tightening the steel nut on top with the washer, and so it can give you a more accurate torque reading. I think that's why with like the K-Series Hondas and a lot of cars nowadays, in a head torque sequence, instead of the old way of just doing a 3-step foot-pound process, they actually will do a degree. And so what that is, or the reason behind that, is because they'll do like a 25 foot-pound base torque, but as you start to get higher in torque, if there's any type of, you know, lubrication issue or binding problem, some of them may torque to spec, and it's not because it's actually clamping torque, it's because the head of the bolt is rubbing, causing it not wanting to spin, giving a false torque reading. Whereas if you do it by degrees, you know, if you all go 90 degrees, some of them may take more force to go 90 degrees, but they're all technically clamping the same amount. So, I mean, I'm sure that's something you could implicate with any motor build, but it's just knowing what degree to do. I'm going to try to get this on fast, and then we will start lubricating washers. The main thing is just have a magnet on hand when you do those washers. And then break out the torque wrench. 3 steps up to 80 foot-pounds. Okay. So come over here, Patrick. Another main reason they have washers on there is because, yet again, the mounting surface in here is aluminum, so that bolt head wanting to spin on the aluminum is going to cause a binding, versus steel on steel, harder surfaces that don't, form to the other. The bottom of the washer can be, stuck to the aluminum in place, but the top can slide along the steel of the bolt. Now I'll have to look. I know I used to have a 12 point, I think it's a 13, but it might be at work. We might have to go get one of those. So you just take some of this ARP lube here, get it on the washer. I will use the magnet here. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect. And then try to feed it down into that hole the best you can. And press it on. Boom. And just repeat that process to get all those washers in place. And I'm not lubricating the top side of the washers because I'm going to lubricate the bottom side of the nuts. So it'll, in effect, lubricate the top side of the washer. So just take your time, be delicate with it. But so I'm going to get all of these all on there and lined up and ready to torque, and then I'll turn the camera back on. Alright, quick interlude. So Cameron over here has already got this motor fucking hung up, getting ready to battle the rear T-bracket. We went to AutoZone and got a whole 1/2 inch socket set over there of 12 point deep 1/2 inch drive, and then I got the 13 right here. So I'm about to get the torque wrench on this bitch. I am going to use an extension, or maybe not actually. I guess we'll just say no to that. We'll start at 25 foot-pounds. Maybe I'll just go to 30, make it an even 30. So you want to start in the center and work your way out. Just like when you're taking it apart, you want to start on the outside and work your way towards the center. So we're just going to torque them all down to 30. There. Hopefully it doesn't try to move on me. lot of times when it's on a stand, it can be a fight just trying to keep the motor from moving. Alright, and so now the bed is torqued and the hard part is over. We can do the timing and all the little accessories on the engine. Start getting, get the cams back in, the cam caps and rails, and then she'll be pretty much ready for Patrick to take back home and hop back in the GSR J front. So I think I'm going to leave it at that. Maybe I'll do a little bit of a video when I repaint this valve cover. I'm going to do wrinkle red again and maybe do another little tutorial on that. Till next time.